Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today, and it's been cathartic over the last couple of years to connect with my peer group because I recognize that even though amidst the morass of mediocrity and the material that we're saturated with so much now in a visual format, there are younger cats who are authentic creatives, have been searching for their own individual sound for basically their entire playing career. And like most of the older cats, they find it on the bandstand. My next guest is somebody who's played live quite a bit with a myriad of different artists, pop rock and singer-songwriter and big band jazz, and he's a teacher in his own right. But the bottom line is he's a teacher who actually has the live bandstand experience. And I think more than anything else, it's cats like my guest who are going to be leading the troops forward in this the next couple of decades, which will prove critical for not only live music, but for the evolution of society in general. Kevin Winard, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, Jake, thank you so much for having me. Wow, I'm really honored that you reached out to me. And I have to thank Austin Beatty, who's a dear friend of mine and a hell of a drummer who lives in San Ynez and has done an incredible amount of touring and recording himself. So he's the one to put us together. So I've got to give him credit for that one.
How was he a student of yours? How did you guys first cross paths?
He was never a student of mine. We both went to the same high school, although I'm quite a bit older, and he was playing in the jazz choir under the direction of Isaac Jenkins, who's passed on, unfortunately, who was kind of like, he was our Mr. Holland's Opus, you know, he was that guy.
Yeah,
he taught literally thousands of students over the years, and Ike had asked me to come in many, many years ago. God, it's got to be over at least maybe 30 years ago? No, 25 maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, that's about right.
I guess. And he asked me to come in, and a young Austin Beatty was playing drums with the jazz choir. And so I was kind of helping him out back then, and then he became, you know, he went on to be doing his own thing in his own right, touring with every style of music, and super creative, super musical, and
total badass. Dude. No, it's an honor.
I love his playing,
and he's
so
just
much.
A great cat. So we have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I don't expect you to know who this is, but pay attention to the content, and we'll come back and break it down.
Okay.
He said, well, you know, because they had this term, avant-garde, and they were talking about the so-called free. And he said, man, the free avant-garde music was what we were doing on Blue Note, not Shep and Albert Elliott and all that.
Really?
He said that. He said, man, and I was the first I heard of it back then, because those cats was doing their thing around, but I didn't say anything about them. Wasn't nobody putting them down. Now you hear, except for Eric Dolphy doesn't belong in them class. Eric was a traditional musician. He knew changes. He knew everything. He could play. He played in the orchestra, in the American Symphony Orchestra. So he's separate from them dudes. Even like Train is separate. But them cats, even Shep and Albert, them cats couldn't play no tunes. They couldn't play no changes.
Okay, this is really important. So Crouch, going back to Crouch, rest in peace, Stanley Crouch. He identified these mid-'60s Blue Note albums as the real avant-garde stuff because there were they were actual tunes.
Well, yeah, because you could hear all the tradition in what we were doing. We could swing, we could play the blues, and we played changes. We would run through changes. We just stretched it out. But them cats couldn't do that.
Well, what could they do that was inspired? Were you inspired by them?
What they could do was what they did. What they did, that's what they could do.
Well, what were they doing? Was it noise?
Yeah.
It was noise. Okay.
Oh man!
I know. I mean that. I'm not even gonna. I mean, if you want to take a gander, you can. But that was.
Well,
yeah.
What instrument? Tell me what.
Well,
instrument.
I'm playing. You're a drummer. Of course, he's one of the greatest. He's a badass drummer. Played on Blue Note, Freddie Hubbard. Made his own albums. Played with Bobby Hutcherson, Joe Chambers. You know that cat?
Sure.
Okay, so that was my second
Yeah.
interview with him, and what basically I was kind of out of context, but what he said was Stanley, and this was revelatory because, like, for my generation and younger, guys like Archie Shepp and Albert Ayler, they're like they're like considered avant-garde jazz musicians. But yet Stanley Crouch was saying to Joe Chambers that in fact it was the mid 60s Blue Note that guys like Andrew Hill and Bobby Hutcherson and Joe Henderson and those cats were doing. It was actually the real avant-garde stuff. It had changers. It focused on tradition. They played through changes, and they added a little bit of new vocabulary. With the thing about, he just would say that Ayler and Shep were squeaking and squawking. They couldn't back up a singer. They couldn't keep a gig. In fact, so it's revelatory to me that, and there's a lot of cats that would come down on that side of it. Rashid Ali, Beaver, Sonny Murray, very free players. But a lot of musicians would say that they really didn't have command of their instruments, and they, for a drummer to just sort of start time on their own or smashing cymbals. I just want to get your take on what he was saying. It was revelatory to me because I love that mid-60s Blue Note stuff. It's pretty sophisticated. And then you listen to the anguish cries of Shep and Ayler, and it's a different bag. And I kind of wanted to ask you about how you felt about that.
Well, I'm going to be completely honest, and I'm embarrassed to say you're mentioning some of these other guys, and I don't know the other guys you're mentioning.
Well,
so
you don't have to be embarrassed, dude. Your resume speaks for itself. I just figured, like in terms of what is in your mind, what does avant-garde jazz mean to Kevin Winard?
Oh my God. Ugh. I've honestly never given a thought. I know it sounds silly. No,
Welcome to
really
the Jake
haven't.
Feinberg Show, dude. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, I had seen on TV Sun Ra and the Art Ensemble in Chicago.
Sure.
And I was like, what the hell is this? I don't get it. And honestly, I haven't on my entire career. I've never been in a situation where I played avant-garde. The only time I did avant-garde would be almost like 20th century percussion, playing 20th century percussion piece in college. And it was challenging from that perspective. But in terms of a jazz setting, I've never done it. It's just never the route that I got called to do. So I never explored it. And honestly, I never even listened to it that much. What I heard of it, I don't want to call myself a traditionalist because I'm not. But I love melody, so I'm a sucker for melody and melodic playing. And it doesn't mean things can't go out. I have no problem with things going out, stretching things harmonically, but it all to me comes back to a certain amount of melody. And I have the best way to describe it is I have a certain bias, and it's maybe because of my lack of education in that genre. So I'm not. I don't want to come across as what's the word,
dude? Dude, honestly, I don't listen to a lot of that stuff either. It's not. I just wonder when going back to the composition, the classical stuff you did in college. Why would you consider that avant-garde?
Well, it probably isn't avant-garde. It was just 20th century music. Which some of us like to call bink bonk. Bink bonk.
Yeah, right.
Complete, Schoenberg, 12-tone row, whatever, 8-tonal kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
And me, give me Ravel, give me Debussy, give me Shostakovich and Prokofiev any day of the week, or Tchaikovsky or something over that. I would rather listen to that. I'd rather play that. Again, it does, and I love Stravinsky. Now, Stravinsky was pushing things harmonically and melodically and rhythmically in the classical genre, so much that there was riot in the streets in Paris when the Rite of Spring premiered. But
Mm.
and I love that. I love that. But there's structure. So I don't know. I mean, if I had been in a situation where there was more of that and I really explored it with some incredible musicians, I might be more open to it. I just don't feel like I can really weigh in on it with any sense of.
No, I did, dude. I love your honesty. It's all good, man. I mean, just yeah. When you say here's the thing. The music that I love to see is like cats like when I see Beatty, for instance. Like I'm always from the crowd in the front row, like an urgent tribal screaming kind of thing, because I want him to play beyond what he knows and just go for it and play with a sense of urgency. So I just wanted to get your own when you say you don't mind playing out, what does that look like? I mean, is that, leaving the head of the tune and you lose that? Like because people think out, they hear, oh, that's free music. What do you when you say I want to go out? What does that mean?
Well, meaning you have a tune, you have structure. Okay, you have a form. Usually it could be an AADA form. And meaning when I'm saying out is more where the piano player or the soloist or whomever harmonically they're playing outside the changes a little bit, like they're stretching things, but the form of the song is still there, and they're still playing within the context of the composition. So it's kind of a push-pull kind of thing, and that can create musical tension.
That's right.
And that can be really fun. As far as like to what you were saying about you want to watch Austin just push himself and go forward. And to that I say from a listening standpoint that can be exciting, but it also has to be in the context of what's happening around you with the other musicians. You can't just go off and do what you want to do because you feel like it.
Absolutely. No, I'm talking about the collective conversation. I'm just saying I want all the guys to go for it. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, I don't. But
see, I don't. It has to be within context, and here comes the conservative musical side of me saying this. It has to be within the context of what is the tune, and what kind of music is it? If you're playing a James Taylor tune, and you're playing back and you're backing up James Taylor, you're going to get fired if you do that. You've got to play his tune, his music, and support him. He's the artist, that kind of thing. I don't know what group you saw Austin playing with. I don't know the kind of music it was, so it's hard for me to say. It's hard for me to even comment on that because I have nothing relevant to adhere to.
Absolutely. No, I mean, well, first of all, it's a Grateful Shred. So I mean, it's a great group.
Okay. So they stretch anyway. Gotcha.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know what it is? Like, I just, what it is? Here's my question: is that like with Tyrell or with Doc Severinsen or all these luminary cats? You know what I don't like? It's just my own thing. I don't like. I know what you're saying. You use the word conservative. It's fine. You got to sing for your supper. But I do not like formula trips. I don't want to go and see somebody just running through the motions, playing the same song the same way every time. I'm not talking about being cavalier and going out and not serving the song. I'm just talking about never playing the same song the same way once. So I ask you as a true professional, how do you get off and stay, aside from the paycheck and just sort of the, how do you get off on a formula trip? Because I just know, a lot of the stuff, sometimes people like James Taylor or Tyrell or any of these singer-songwriters, they're basically playing a pretty similar set list every night.
Yeah. There could be some changes here and there, but to what you're saying, yes, it's a show. It's a show. It's right. Like how does somebody go in and do a Broadway show? To that, I would say, going back to classical music, they have to play the same notes, and they play those pieces a million times, and they have to play them like they played it the first time. That they like they've never played it before. It's not in at least what I do. I can mix it up slightly with certain different things. It might be a slightly different fill. It might be I might stay in brushes and not go to sticks on this one thing. And it'd be a real subtle difference. And that's satisfying to me. It's like, okay, I found something that was a little different that I wanted to try tonight, and it worked.
Dig.
To me, the challenge is whatever I'm doing, because I'm, as long as I've been playing this stupid instrument, I still feel like I'm not even remotely close to being good. You know what I mean? It sounds crazy, but it's honest. It's like I'm my own worst enemy, so I'm always going, well, I could have done that better, or that was pretty good. Okay, cool. Oh, that really sucked. So I'm self-absorbed in that sense of maybe if I was astounding like a Vinny Colaiuta, I could, who I saw you interview, and if I had that level of genius, then I might think of things differently, But I'm just going, well, I'm never going to be that. I'm just trying to be as musical as I possibly can. That really is my goal, and the more I've done this, the more I want to be thought of, at least for myself. I can't expect anybody to think of me in any way, because I can't control anybody's thoughts. But I want to think of myself as a musician that happens to play drums.
I love it. Tell me,
does that make sense?
No, it's absolutely. You're a pro, man. I mean, here's the bottom line. I mean, I'm not a musician. I'm just a patron and a rogue journalist. But I wanted to, this is really important. Like, I just wanted you to talk about. To me, one of the things that I love, especially if you go back to, let's just say the San Francisco movement of the late '60s. I'm very close friends with, David Garibaldi, Greg Errico, Michael Shreve. These guys were not playing jazz, but they were jazz freaks. They obviously came up playing in big bands and with Sly and with Santana, Tower of Power, and to a degree like Kreutzmann with the Dead, they were feathering the bass drum. And I really wanted you to talk to younger cats about how you have learned to incorporate feathering the bass drum into the musicality of the performance, because I hear a lot of people relying on double bass drums, propensity of just hammering away like machine guns, and there's nothing more intoxicating than the feathering. And I wanted you to talk about how you developed that.
Man, it's funny. You're asking some really great questions, and it's funny that you mentioned it.
Yeah.
I honestly, it's been like the last couple of years that I started feathering the bass drum.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah. But now we're talking jazz, right? We're talking playing jazz.
I think right? Also, jazz. Let's just talk about it in the jazz context. How did you get comfortable doing it?
Well, I'm still working on it, to be honest, because it's funny. I saw an old. There's been coming out. I think it was circulating on the interwebs like the last year. A video that Mel Lewis did, where he's talking about feathering the bass drum. And Jeff Hamilton talks about feathering the bass drum, too.
Sure.
And not every jazz drummer does do it. But there is something to it that gives it a little, just like a comfortable pillow thing. And I can't do it really on up-tempo stuff. I don't have that technique down to do it. But medium, definitely. Medium tempos, sure, I can feather it lightly. And also, getting in the drum geek world, it really depends on the tuning of your bass drum. If you have it slightly muffled with, not a thick pillow in it and totally dead, because if you feather it with that, nobody's even going to really hear it.
Right.
Because it's just such a dead thing. It's literally like tapping a pillow, But if the drum is a little bit open, like an 18-inch bass drum, and you got maybe some felt on the batter side or something, or just something or a little towel against the batter, whatever, and then there's no port in the front, then you can have a little tone, and that's where you can feather it, and it's going to make a difference. But it's going to be more one of those felt than heard things, and it's a nice it adds a little depth and weight to the feel, I think. And so what did I do? I'm just going back to trying to work on playing flat-footed, which most jazz drummers do. Most rock drummers play with the ball of their foot up, with the heel slightly up. So it just totally depends. And you ask any drummer, they're all different. The foot technique thing is all different, and for me, it's a never-ending thing. Like you watch Vinny's feet, he can do whatever he wants with them. You know what I mean? Steve Gadd's the same way. Steve Gadd has unbelievable foot technique. And then sometimes the other drummers that are jazz drummers may not have like a full-on jazz drummers that don't really play anything else but straight ahead.
Sure.
If you ask them to play a samba, sometimes it's hard for them because they don't have the foot technique. Or, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, Gadd was a tap dancer. I mean, that, it's unbelievable how, I mean, they make it look like, I mean, it's totally second nature. Do you feel like you're able to integrate the feathering of the bass drum in other genres of music?
I'm working on it in doing samba because
wow.
I recently took a lesson with a great. Oh, by the way, here's a drummer you should interview is Rafael Barata.
Hook it up immediately.
Yeah. And I took a lesson, and I used to work with Sergio Mendes.
Really?
I subbed for a drummer named Michael. Yeah, well, I subbed for a drummer named Michael Shapiro, who unfortunately recently passed away. But many years ago, I subbed for off and on for about 5 or 6 years while juggling other gigs. I was subbing for Mike, going to Japan with Sergio and Philippines and Europe and stuff. And on that gig, I couldn't play the bass drum loud enough for Sergio. It was like the way Mike described the gig was like he says, think of Nirvana, but you're playing samba. I'm like, and it was such a weird concept because I had grown up, you listen to Bossa Nova, you listen to Astrid Gilberto and Drauzio Alberto and
Stan Getz, absolutely.
Tom Jobim, all that stuff.
Right.
All that's super soft and super delicate and really elegant. But even the Bossa Novas, he wanted it powerful because it was a big band. It had a percussionist, sometimes two percussionists, three singers, 2 keyboards, bass, guitar. It was a big band. It was almost like a Vegas show. It was high energy. So I got into the habit of doing that. So when I had this lesson, this was a couple months ago, I was playing at Scullers with Steve Tyrell, and I called up Rafael and got a lesson with him. And he goes, "You're playing your bass drum too loud." I said, "What?" You're kidding. And this is a lot softer than I would normally play with Sergio.
Right.
And he plays completely flat-footed. And he can play the fastest samba flat-footed. And I'm like, God bless you. Wow. And I'm just watching his foot, and he's playing so soft and so brilliant. And I'm going, man, that is the stuff. I wasn't going to cuss on you.
You can do it.
Well, that's the shit. And I'm like, man, I want to be able to do that. So I've been working on that, trying to play flat-footed, play faster samba, and keep it really, really soft. That's really hard. It's really, really hard. So, but
let me ask you. I want to ask you because this is like we're talking to somebody who's. You've been on the bandstand with a number of different. Why do you believe? You can put your ego aside for a minute, but what makes you an in-demand outside of being reliable, being on time, some of the more, sort of nuanced things like how have you become a sought-after drummer in your career, regardless of what, it's the forever journey. You're always going to be working on these things.
Of course.
But why have you, even in the midst of I'm very, I'm not depressed, but it's like, the touring circuits that once ruled this country and quite frankly the world as it related to jazz and the Chitlin circuits and R&B and stuff. They've been they've been decimated, but yet there's cats like you who have toured the world with seminal names, and I'm just wondering why you believe that you have been able to sing for your supper on the bandstand.
I think because I really give a shit. You know what I mean?
You do, yeah. It's your purpose in life, yeah.
Well, and also I want to give whoever I'm working with, my all. And I may not always hit the mark, that's the humble side of me coming again, but I really care. I don't take it lightly. And I, people would go, "Oh, you're doing this and doing that." And it's like, man, I don't care if I'm got hired to play a polka. If the band's great, the band's great. If they're all playing their asses off and playing a polka.
Yeah.
But that's the way I've always thought about it. Yeah. It shouldn't matter. Now, when you have musicians on the bandstand that don't care and they have an attitude and they think that this is stupid or whatever, And sometimes, granted, you're put in situations you get called to do things, and sometimes they're lame. Absolutely. And you got to make the best of it. And it's hard. Sometimes there's things that go against your sense of musicality or musical sensibility, and you're working with a singer that's not great, and not all gigs are going to be killing, and not all gigs are going to be with great musicians. That's the rub, and it's hard to keep the attitude up and keep it positive. And that's a struggle for me too. But when you're playing with good players and you're lucky to be on the road with really good players, you at least I feel you have an obligation that you don't want to let them down. You want to. It really is a team effort, and like working with Doc. Doc was so dedicated. I did about 5-6 years with him.
Dude, that is so legendary, dude. That man, I need to get to Doc Severance. I need to talk to that cat immediately. I love him, dude.
I mean, it was really every gig that we did, he was there before. After the rehearsal with the symphony for 2.5 hours, he'd come in before the show, and he'd be doing long tones in the hallway.
Right. He first to come, last to leave. I just setting the tone. I love that.
Yeah, and so you respect, and I liked the guy. I really liked him. He was not only was he, the fact he was Doc, but he was a good guy, and we would talk off the bandstand. Just he'd tell me stories about different things and just life stuff. So you get to know the person, and then you start wanting to give your all for the person. I've worked for somebody that was a notorious jerk. And still is, I did the gig for about 6 months, and I vowed I never would put myself in a situation like that again, where somebody could be that abusive. I was just like, you know what, no money's worth that.
Wow.
Forget it.
Yeah.
Just and there are stories of a lot of people, especially old school band leaders that were tyrants. On the band.
Well, and then are they very Jekyll and Hyde kind of stuff? Like 1 minute they're treating you like they're your uncle, and the next minute they're reaming you out or something. It's very disconcerting, and then you have to somehow go up and play, try to play spiritual music. But I mean, do you feel like you are because you care that when you're in a situation where the singer and or the leader might be dragging or really kind of not cutting it, and it's kind of lame, and everybody's kind of other cats are whining and bitching about it. Do you feel like, have you been in situations where you're like, no, I have to raise my level and get everybody on the same page to at least get through this session? Do you feel like you try to help those people who are scuffling when you're not necessarily playing with the greatest musicians?
Maybe. I mean, yeah. I mean, but I've been in a situation. I remember I've been in a situation with a piano player who gave me a lot of work locally in Santa Barbara, and sometimes he would just go, "Okay, that's good enough," and I would get mad.
Right. Well, I love it, dude.
No,
you're like, no, it's not good enough, dude.
I wanted, let's do another one, and we'd have a little fight about it because I'd be like, my name's gonna. It was selfish reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not that sanctimonious or altruistic. I can't. I'd be lying to say, I'm the guy that brings everybody up. No, I'm not. I'm really not. I mean,
I did.
If nothing, I'm honest. I mean, if I felt that something wasn't happening, I'd say, listen, we got to do this again. It's not happening. Come on, please. And then he'd get mad, and I'd say. And there was a time that he stopped hiring me because I was becoming a pain in the ass. Because I would go, I can't let this go. And then so, and then he'd rehire me and everything would be fine. But as far as I love teaching and working with students, and I've done some of that, and it's really fun and really rewarding. It's when you're in a band situation, egos are super, super crucial. They're really involved. And
wow, true.
I'm just at a point where I like to. I'm fortunate on the road, especially with Steve's band. I get to play with some amazing players, and they all do their job so well. So that it's just kind of like, let's all just go out and have a good time. And the struggle with the players that are not as great or whatever. Fortunately, I don't have that as much as I used to growing up.
Yeah, I mean, you're not Mother Teresa. It's not even about that. Like talking to Kevin Winard here on the Jake Feinberg Show, very humble cat. I got another Name That Voice for you. Don't worry about it. Just pay attention to the content, and we'll come back.
Okay.
You know what, man? I play in front of the students to show them that I can play. See, a lot of teachers, I've had a lot of teachers, they were great teachers, but I never heard them play. You know what I mean? Classical teachers, I never heard them play, but they knew how to teach you, you know? And see, what I do, I make sure that I play. I play in front of them. I say, look here, I can play. And that's what I do. I play in front of them and show them that I can play. That's very important as far as I'm concerned.
Well, but hold on. Why is it important? They know you can play. It's about them playing.
No, you have to do it in front of them where they can see it. They have to see this. They have to see it, and then they got to feel it. See, I got to sit at the piano sometime by myself. I sit at the piano and I just start playing, and they learn. Oh, this is the way it's supposed to be, because they feel it ahead of time.
I did.
They feel it without the bass player, without the drummer. That's where we goof a lot. Is that, see, one time I went to Birdland, and it was a jam session, and oh God, Earl Garner set in.
Mm-hmm.
I heard Earl Garner set in at this jam session, man, and something told me. I said, Lordy. So that's the secret. You have to swing by yourself.
You have to. Mr. Winard, it's been a heavy week. We've lost a couple of Titans, and that word jazz bothers me, but melodic improvisation. That was my interview with the legendary Barry Harris, who just left us. You know Barry?
It's
okay. It's fine. No big deal. I mean, the guy played with Bird. He grew up in Detroit. Joe Henderson and these cats were. Paul Chambers went to go see him to learn how to play changes. I mean, he was from that Tommy Flanagan, Kenny Burrell kind of scene. Maybe even, But being that I really wanted you to. Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to say
Please.
One thing that I wanted to say when he said he's playing. And he said, you got to play by yourself and you got to be able to swing. That's absolutely true. That is absolutely true. And that could go for any groove. You know what I mean? And you got to make yourself want to dance.
Exactly, dude. You got to let the body dance, man. I mean, how did you, as a drummer, so what does he mean by that? Because a lot of people would be like, what does he talk? The band's got to swing. But he's like, no, you have to swing.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, because people can influence you, but you got to make it feel good. And it's basically everybody is responsible for making what they're doing right. Nobody else is responsible for you. That's the bottom line. You're responsible for you. The bass player's not responsible for the drummer. Drummer's not responsible for the bass player. And on it goes. The horn players, the drummers. There used to be this adage that the drummer is responsible for the time. That's what big band directors in high school and junior high would always say. They put it all on the drummer, and I never agreed to that. No, everybody's responsible, and then they have to agree. It has to be an agreement, and that's where the communication comes in, and then it has to be trust. So it really is a relationship, and it's if you break it all down, it's communication and it's language and it's a relationship of communication and trust. That's what music is. That's why you could have the Beatles and you could have Ringo playing and go, well, yeah, he's not the most technical drummer, but then you listen to what he came up with and you go, why? I mean, you could, and I would bet you dollars of donuts that you could ask Vinny, you could ask Steve Gadd, and they go, yeah, if I played in that band, it would be a thing, but it wouldn't be the same.
Right.
because there's a certain magic.
Well, I mean,
There's a certain,
Julian Priest.
and
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, and just like Philly Joe with Paul Chambers, and Wynton Kelly. I mean, come on, or Jimmy Cobb and Paul Chambers and Wynton, or can't think of the other guy. Oh boy, but Red Garland, or Louis Hayes playing with Cannonball,
Swinging.
I mean, that's
swinging hard.
so swinging. But if you listen. I mean, if anybody wants to learn how to swing, listen to those rhythm sections. To me, and then listen to Cannonball's phrasing. Nobody swung harder on alto than Cannonball in my book.
Yeah,
Nobody
dude.
on the
I
planet.
got it. I don't know. He had this band with Roy McCurdy too. That was just swinging. Walter Booker and those guys. But
Sure.
Okay. Like you're talking about everybody having their own inner time feel, so that the responsibility of swinging is on everybody or on each individual person, not just the drummer. Sun Ra used to point to cats to solo, and basically what it does is, in some ways, when everybody has their own inner time feel, then it frees up the rhythm section to play more melodically. And I just wonder, like, in your case, how do you work with students today who, I mean, let's face it, when you were coming up, I mean, you were in bands, there were gigs. I think you cut your first album when you were 19 years old, or, I mean,
it was just for my 18th birthday.
18th. So, I mean, you were playing in collectives. Your ears were huge. You were aware of the conversation. And today, with a lot of cats, they're just playing by themselves. And that's the tragedy of the whole. There's just not a lot of gigs. There's a supply and demand issue. And I just wonder how you talk to cats about, or do you actually have to play for them, like Barry was saying, because they have to see it and then they have to feel it.
Well, there's something to be said, like when you're sitting there and watching a musician or a drummer do something right in front of you, there's something there where you go, oh, okay, and like this guy Rafael that I took his I took video for it, just so I can go back and watch it.
Right.
But I'm watching it, and then I'm just like, and then I can remember the sense memory of, yeah, look at its hand position, this and that, and this and that. The thing about learning today, which I'm going to get into a different thing, but with the advent of YouTube, which is a great tool for learning things, especially for free, because it's all out there.
Mm-hmm.
You can go. I mean, the access to information. I'm sure other drummers and musicians have talked about this. That the information is out there more so than it's ever been. In terms of, I want to learn how blah 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 played this. Okay, it's there. Then somebody will transcribe it. Then somebody will demonstrate it, and they'll slow it down. So you're learning the technique. You're learning the sticking, for lack of a better term, or the fingering on a saxophone or piano or guitar, and or the structure of how they voice the chords or whatever. So all the information is there. The only thing that's not there is context, and that's the thing that you get from playing, as to why did they play that then. So musically, why did they make that choice? And that's what I ask students. It's like, I'll show you this, but then I want you to listen to this and this and this, and not only listen to what the drummer is doing, but open up your ears and listen to what the piano player is doing. Listen to what the bass player is doing. What is the soloist doing? And then kind of decide and try to analyze, why did the drummer play this then? Well, what was happening around him or her? So that's context. And that's context. To understand context makes you more musical. Right?
I mean, yes, absolutely. I mean, do you feel like it's something, first of all, did you grow up learning music by ear before you learned to read music?
No, I learned, well, my dad used to be a drummer. He was older, and he was born in 1922. So both my parents passed on, but they always played music in the house. Jazz
Was he like a
always being
vaudeville?
played.
Was he like a vaudeville drummer or something?
No. He just took lessons from this guy named Irving Togman in Brooklyn, and
Wow.
who I think taught Davey Tuff, who's a famous drummer back then.
Yeah.
And then my dad went to World War II, and then he never played drums again. But he always had a pair of drumsticks around the house. He was always banging on stuff. And as a
He had
kid,
a
I'm
practice.
going, well, cool.
That's so Joe Morello right there. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. He was always playing in armchairs. He was always playing and just playing to the music. And so I told him I want to take drum lessons at 10. And so I did, and I studied with this guy named Tony Cappiello, who we're still dear friends. He's like a second dad to me. He lives in Washington State
That's
now,
the cat who I want to talk to, by the way. That's the dude, man.
Who?
Cappiello.
Tony?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I can give you his number.
Yeah.
But so I studied with him, and he studied with a guy named Freddie Gruber, who was kind of a drum teacher guru to so
Oh no,
many people.
I've interviewed Gene Stone. He had the pillow technique. Freddie Gruber was the shaman drummer, man.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so I got a lot of great technique, and Tony turned me on to a lot of different listening stuff. But and I was coming up like from 10 to 14, but there was still, by the time I was even 18, 19, I was still kind of figuring stuff out, musically. And I look back now as far as choices, musical choices of what I did back then, and certain things were really cool, and certain things were like, okay, that was terrible, but that is the journey. It never ends. You never stop learning. And that, I think that's, for me, when you're talking about, do I feel like this necessity to just go nuts and do that and do this? I'm actually trying to go more inward in a sense. I'm trying to find the most musical choices I can. And that's what astounds me about a guy like Steve Gadd, is because I look at his career, and it was my teacher that turned me on to Steve. And, when I was a kid, I was totally into Buddy Rich. That was my guy. I was into Buddy Rich. Then I learned about Steve Gadd. And their playing is so different, so vastly different. But Gadd was the guy that was playing everything, every style of music, getting called to do every possible thing you could. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to be a versatile guy. I want to be a guy who can do everything. And it just spoke to me for some reason. And I was like 13 going, I want to be a studio drummer. I didn't want to tour. I really didn't.
I dig. No, I think it's fantastic. You're the first cat that. Well, Harvey Mason was the same way. Most of these guys, but I mean the fact that you were. What? I'm sorry. What? But what years was in the? Because I mean the studios really were.
Well, the studios were killed. Obviously, the 60s, 70s.
Right. They were disappearing a little bit by the 80s, but I mean it was just.
Oh yeah. Well, 80s was still strong, but then the 90s, and then when the record industry died, everything changed. And now everybody has home studios anyway. So
let me ask you though, like your teacher who studied with Gruber. How did he teach you about context? Is it similar to the way is it translatable to the way? I always look
No, it was.
No, you know what it is? I just want to make this point, and then you can riff on it. Because, like, Billy Childs, for instance, like the piano player I interviewed, the guy's freaking going on tour with J.J. Johnson and Freddie Hubbard, right? That's a free education. Now,
sure.
Now he's teaching at Berkeley, which is cool. I mean, it's a paycheck, but it's diametrically different than the way he was taught. And I just wonder how authentically it is, how much that you were taught was the education you received. Is there anything translatable to how you teach today?
Yeah, well, it's funny. When I started teaching, when I was younger, I was kind of going the route that I was taught from Tony, which was more in the lines of hand technique, more in the lines of the technical things. So Freddie Gruber, I don't think was really into context in terms of making musical choices. Mm-hmm. He was into technique. That was his thing, because he was best friends with Buddy. So you learn those techniques to work on your hands so that you can execute what you need to know. So Tony would turn me on to recordings and check this out, and check this out, and he'd make tapes for me and that stuff. But I was too young to really get it.
Dig.
It wasn't Tony's fault. I was just too young. I didn't really understand how awesome these things that he was showing me were. And so musical context, it was exactly what you're saying. I learned really from making mistakes, and I'm still learning, and from listening and thousands of hours of listening and checking things out, not just for learning solo licks and learning this and that, but listening to why did somebody like a Steve Gadd choose this kind of groove for this part in the verse, for this tune, and analyzing things, just really thinking about it, and just listening and you're putting on your critical ear. So to that, when I got older in teaching like college students, I would not only teach them certain things, like, here, check this pattern out, check this independence exercise out, check this out, but also I want you to start listening with a critical ear and picking apart things, and then come back and explain to me why this works or what. And also, conversely, you can listen to something and go, why doesn't it work? You can always learn. And I told this to students too. You can go to a bar band and say you can see some of the most incredible musicians playing in a bar, and you go, oh my God, these guys are killing it. and you can go into a bar band somewhere and they're terrible.
Yeah.
And you can go and you can, but there's also an opportunity. You can go, why is it terrible? You can learn from that.
I dig. It's always seizing, being in the moment. I just wonder, can you talk to the audience about a time when you did fall apart on the bandstand, but in hindsight, looking back, it was like one of the most emboldening things, because you learned that, I don't know, just to me, like in music and in life, through adversity, that's when you grow the most. And I just wonder if there was a time in your career when you can look at that and say, actually, that was, even though that was painful at the time, it was actually cathartic for my whole constitution.
Man, you're asking questions. They say there's no accidents.
Right. There's no coincidences. That's the thing. There's none. There's no coincidence.
Oh, okay, yeah. There's no coincidence. It's funny you mention this. I mean, yeah, I don't know how cathartic it would be, because those things actually still haunt me to this day.
But that's okay, because it's the feeling. I dig.
I'm not kidding. It's like, oh yeah. I mean, if we're being honest, I remember a gig, a couple of gigs with Sergio. We were at the North Sea Festival, and Mike Shapiro was there, and I'm playing his show in front of him, and he was on tour playing percussion with Al Jarreau, with Michael Baker on drums, and they played just before us. So Mike's on the side. My monitors sucked. Everything sucked. It was such a terrible performance, and I just remember just wanting to just crawl under a rock and just go away. I've had those experiences, and I think I don't know if the greats have ever had those experiences. I have no idea. I can't speak for them.
No, I mean, I can just tell you that guys like Denny Sywell from Wings,
yeah.
He would get up on the bandstand in the south side of Chicago, and Lou Donaldson told him to get the fuck off the stage because he couldn't play a shuffle. It was pretty hardcore. I think everybody's had that crawling under a rock feeling. I just wonder, it wasn't about, because that was more like dynamics. The sound wasn't good, but I just wonder about like a situation where you were. Here's the question: talk about a time in your life when you faced adversity, how you overcame it, and how it made you stronger.
Okay, all right. Actually, you know what? I do remember a specific moment. I was young. I was maybe 16, 17, and it was with the Santa Barbara Symphony, not a great symphony, but I called to play snare drum. And I had a fair amount of symphony, but I didn't have orchestral, and I called to do this. and the piece they're playing which is John Williams, and that part is actually I has all these rough. I couldn't do it. I could do like playing soundtracks and sub with the LA Phil, and he's an incredible person. He was playing campus, and he's older. He's an older guy, and I see him watching me struggle, and I see him go to the contractor, as musicians, looking at me. I'm this young kid, and he's looking at me, talking to him. This guy. And I went back and I practiced the absolute shit out of that part. hours and hours. Like, I'm going to go in and nail this. And I remember that. So since you're talking about adversity, I just buckled down and I did it. And then I played and I got through it and we did the performance and it all worked out. And then later on, I went up to him, that symphonist. I said, "Do you teach? I want to take lessons with you." And then from there, I drove down. My senior school, and then and one nice story that actually I remember it's a really nice memory is when I was subbing with Sergio many years later. I think it was in 97, 98 or something like that, and he had two concerts with the Hollywood Bowl Symphony. With Sergio with the Hollywood Bowl Symphony, and Greg was in the orchestra. And he got to see me play drum set. He had never seen me play drum set, and he got to see me play drums with Sergio, and he's playing timpani. Wow. And it was just a really nice full circle. And he goes, "Man, you are sounding so good."
That's what I'm talking about, man. That's unbelievable.
I forgot about that story until you brought it up. And it's like, I got to pat myself on the back because I do tend to get a little hard on myself.
Well, okay, I just want to be clear because the reception, it's funny, I guess the spirits didn't really want you to fully acknowledge the vulnerability that you had at that time. But so basically you were playing a snare drum part and really scuffling at it. But the reality is that you maybe wallowed in self-pity for half a second, but basically went into the woodshed and just worked it out. Talk a little bit, it's just kind of the intestinal fort. How many years was it between that incident and then the Hollywood Bowl?
Let me see. So that would have been, 83 to maybe like 13, 14 years.
Wow. See, that's a powerful story for you. That is the long game right there. That it's not an overnight thing, you know.
No. That's exactly right. And I, to what you're talking about society today, and I mean, we could just go on for hours talking about hours and hours and hours about what our culture has turned into, which is really kind of weird and scary.
Yep. Very.
It's just billions of people with ADHD.
Well, I mean, I remember the great Charlie Persip, the great drummer. He said we don't really have culture anymore. We're just one big civilization, and you can see what that's producing. It's pretty scary, especially if you don't know where you came from. That's the problem. If you don't know where you came from, how do you know where you're supposed to be going? You know.
Well, that's and that's the thing that there is a culture amongst drummers.
Mm-hmm.
At least friends that I have, that my peers that I look up to and respect, and we'll always talk about people that came before us. And in fact, Austin, actually, I remember I saw him a few months ago, and then he's telling me about Jim Keltner. I'm like, I know a few cuts of Keltner, and he goes, "Oh, let me give you I'm going to send you my playlist of Jim Keltner on Spotify." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Now I'm seeing how you're influenced by him." totally get it. You know what I mean? And,
Yeah,
and,
I
and
did.
it opened my eyes up to Austin in his approach on certain things. You know, he's got that rootsy vibe, that really greasy, groovy, rootsy vibe that I love. And I'm like, that's it. Wow. And that's the great thing about drumming in every instrument. You could get 5 different incredible drummers to play one tune, and it could be jazz, it could be a pop tune, it could be a singer-songwriter tune. They're all going to approach it differently.
Absolutely.
They're all going to
Absolutely.
They're all going to bring their culture of what they grew up listening to, and it's going to be an influence of that, you know. And I've done that as a session player. I've referenced things that I grew up listening to, going, this kind of reminds me of this. Maybe just a touch of this kind of vibe, you know. I kind of pick from my bag of tricks of what I've learned before, and I'm sure that's what other people do, you know. And drummers can get together and talk for hours over.
Well, no, because we have to do set 2 as soon as. I mean, I got Chuck Rainey in 5 minutes for my 6th interview.
Oh.
But no, but I just wanted to ask you before we wrap up set 1. You know, because most people want to. I think what you talked about, being a jack of all trades, a master of all, wanting to be doing everything. A lot of people want that. What I love about the old school cats is just the idea that everybody wanted to have their own individual sound. And if somebody came up to them and was like, yo, you sounded great, you sounded just like so-and-so, they'd want to slit their wrists. And I just wonder about like your own, if you're still searching for your own individual sound, or do you feel like people are like, oh, that's Winard playing?
You know, that's a great question. I know you got to go, but I think I have my own sound. I mean,
yeah,
there's certain things that are categorically me, I think. But you know, it's funny. Jeff Hamilton gave a clinic at our local city college over the summer, and he addressed that because, you know, you can hear Jeff Hamilton go, I hear Jeff Hamilton in 2 seconds, you know, and nobody has his swing feel, and it's just, he's such an incredible musician and a great human being. But you know, he said he tells young players, don't worry about finding your sound. Concern yourself making good music with other musicians. And that to me is you know, that to me is more important. I'm just of that school, so I don't know. I'm not objective enough to know. I can hear something and go, that sounds like me. Like sometimes I'll forget I recorded something with somebody. Oh yeah, that is me, and so I can identify that. Okay, that sounds like my time feel, or that sounds like the way I hit a hi-hat, or whatever. You know what I mean? I've never concerned myself with it because I didn't grow up just playing jazz. So I played a variety of things. I just wanted to be the best that I could possibly be for the situation, and I think I have my own sound, but I don't. It was never that important. And then that's getting back to culture and what's happening today. Everybody's so obsessed with having their own identity, with this and that, whatever they identify as. You know, to me, you're kind of missing the point.
Dude, we need to let's do set 2 let's just get into set 2 and start right there, because it's really important. Why are they missing the point?
They're missing the point because it can go to you know, on Instagram or whatever, you know, Twitter, whatever, Snapchat. Everybody, you know, kids are obsessed with their own identities and being recognized for who they are. And to me, it's more important to be recognized for what you produce.
Yeah, that's right.
Because identity doesn't mean anything if you're not contributing to the greater good of what's around you. Identity doesn't mean crap. It's just a badge, it's a name tag. So to that I say, if you're musical, you can be very unmusical and have your own identity. And to that I say, who cares?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing is creation and like what we just did here. Preferably co-creation, and then let other people, you know, let it get out there, and and be inspired. And if we can inspire one person, then that's what I've been doing for 10 years, just trying to drag people, get them out of their thinking mind and get them talking about things they haven't thought about. And ultimately, my whole MO is about constant creation in any form. But I like collaborating, and I like doing it within the group context. And so, Kevin Winard, I mean, we just cooked for an hour, man. We got to do it again soon.
I would love to, man. I hope I got to give you a serious compliment, because I've done a couple podcasts before, answering questions about how they grew up, where I did this and that this. Your questions are so thought provoking. I'm just kind of like, it's almost like a boxing match, but in a good way.
I know, dude. What I'm saying is, man, like what I love is that you can hang up the phone and be like, I don't really know what I just talked about, but it was fun, and that's all that matters. You want the feel.
Oh, yeah.
You want that feel, and that's the thing. I mean, but you did great, man, and let's stay in touch, man. We'll do it again.
Okay, I'll let you go. I hope it wasn't too negative.
No, you know what? My only thing is, as you bring in the new year, stay humble, but love yourself and don't be too hard on yourself. You're doing a great job.
All right. Well, thank you, man.
All right, but be cool, man.
I'd love to do it again.
We will. Thanks. Yeah, peace.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks to Austin Beatty for that connection with Kevin Winard. Great hang, and we'll be back with Chuck Rainey right after this.